and welcome to Dip In and Out with Lucy, the podcast that opens up the discussion around domestic abuse. I'm very fortunate to be here on this bank holiday Monday with the wonderful Pearson, who is author of Be Kind, No Excuses and founder of the C.I.C. Be Kind, No Excuses. And as is my usual format, I go straight over to my guest and ask them a bit more about what they do and why they do it. So good afternoon, Ree.
Good afternoon, Lucy. Thank you for having me today. It's an absolute pleasure to talk to you again. It's lovely to speak to somebody who gets it, isn't it?
Oh, God.
Sometimes.
Yeah.
I think, well, basically my background is in policing. I was a police officer for 27 years.
Yeah.
And my specialism was domestic abuse. I worked in what was then called public protection units. I worked in Northumbria Police. And the public protection unit included domestic abuse and child protection. I firmly believe that domestic abuse is child abuse. I don't think there's a, I don't think you can split those two things.
Yeah.
So I retired early through ill health. That's why I didn't do the full 30 years, which was a bit of a blow financially.
Say at 27 years, you were not
27,
far off.
So close. I was like, I got so poorly and there was absolutely no way I could stay. Fortunately, I'm pretty much recovered now. It was a little while ago. But I've always had a little side hustle. I was a single mum for a long time.
Yeah.
And even with a full-time job, I live at the seaside, right?
Oh.
And kayaks are expensive.
Yeah.
And and I was always the kind of parent who was like, I will say no to my children.
Yeah.
But not because I can't afford it. And that was one of my basic principles to me.
Yeah.
And so I always had what people would describe as a side hustle. So I've had several different online or multi-level type of businesses. And at the time we went into the pandemic, I was and still am in a business.
Yeah.
And we took all of our networking meetings from face-to-face monthly to Zoom calls. Can you remember that?
Yeah.
You're on mute,
yes.
that line of the pandemic. And I was in a business network and everybody was really stressed. I remember the first time we went into the first lockdown, the news was terrible. We all thought lots of people died during that. Businesses, people who own businesses didn't know whether they were coming or going. Everybody was closed. They were worried about their business. They were worried about their staff. We were pretty much in the dark. And on this network meeting, I didn't want to leave people feeling so scared and down. So I said, come on, can we refocus and tell me what you're going to do? Because we didn't know how long this lockdown was going to be. We had no clue what was coming, did we?
No, God, no.
Oh, dear me.
If you knew then what you know now.
They couldn't do that again. But I said to them, what are you going to do now that you're not on your business, now that you're not working in your business, now that it's not, taking up all of your time? Because as a self-employed person, that's what happens, isn't it? It becomes your baby. And I said, what are you going to do in the time that you now have? So people were thinking, I'm gonna go on YouTube and learn how to paint with watercolors, or I'm going to use the hour that we're allowed outside to do some Nordic walking, and all of these ideas. I'm going to start knitting again, or whatever it was they were going to do. And I said, well, I've got a book in the back of my mind that I've been thinking about for a long time, because there are so many fantastic books out there, so much good literature about domestic abuse, but it's all after the fact. It's recovery, and my husband nearly killed me, da da da. And while those are brilliant, I always thought, well, there's a pattern to abuse. And
absolutely.
if you can see a pattern, it's like knitting. If you know that pattern, if you learn that pattern, you can teach that pattern.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, I'm going to write a book. And then the following month, I'm on the same network meeting, and they said, how's the book coming along? And I said, what book? And they said, you said you were going to write a book. And I was like, did I? Because I've got ME, right? And among other things, there's a lot of challenges going on in here. And I said, did I? And they said, yes, you said you were going to write a book and it was going to be this and that. And I was like, oh, right, okay. I was like, well, I'll do it then. I'm going to have to do it now, because when you're self-employed, people who you network with are your accountability buddies, aren't they?
Yeah, absolutely.
And they're wicked, like
Yeah.
they never let it go. So that's how it started, and
Wow.
somehow word got out, and I wanted to write a book, not with statistics, but with stories, because I think you remember stories better.
Yeah.
And I wanted the book to be focused and directed at a 14-year-old girl, really. It's written for teenage girls.
Yeah.
And so I said, I want true stories. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to analyze the stories and show people where the red flags are in those abusive relationships. So women started sending me their stories. Well, I started getting messages first saying, will you tell my story? I was getting calls, will you tell my story? Because a lot of victims just want to have a voice.
Yeah.
They just want to be
Yeah.
heard. They don't necessarily want to go through the criminal justice system. They don't necessarily want a conviction.
Yeah.
But they want to be heard, and they want
Yeah.
to be believed.
Yeah. They want to be validated, don't they? They want to, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
So these ladies were coming to me, and I said to them, well, if you could write your story from the moment that you met your abuser to be,
Yeah.
because I firmly believe that those red flags, those behaviors are clearly there very quickly,
Yeah. Yeah.
because that person is who that person is,
Yeah. Yeah, that's so true. That
and
is so true.
it's just there. So eventually, I mean, a few ladies said they would write it, and then I was like, you've got to be careful, because when you are revisiting those memories, you can be re-traumatizing
Yeah,
yourself.
absolutely. Yeah.
So a lot
Definitely.
of women started and then came back to me and said, I can't do it. And I was like, that's fine, absolutely fine. But what I wanted to do was show like a spectrum of different lifestyles.
Yeah.
So in the end, I mean, there are gaps in the book, definitely. There's not a story about pet cruelty to animals,
Yeah.
which is a biggie.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
There's not a story about forced marriage. There's not a story about female genital mutilation. So there are gaps, and that's because those people who did come forward to talk about those things just couldn't. They
Yeah.
just weren't in that right space. So there are 5 stories in there. Of the 5, 4 of them are teenagers when they met their abuser to be. And what
Yeah.
I did was I've basically taken it from the moment they met, and there are red flags in the first few paragraphs, because
Yeah.
like I said, abuse follows a pattern. And if you know what you look for, like honestly, sometimes I get on my own nerves. Like because I can see things and I'm like, I wish I didn't know that. But
Yeah.
then but I do know that, and you can't unsee what you see.
I was just going to say you can't once you and that's so true. Once you see it, you can't unsee it.
And
You
I'm like,
can't.
oh, when you think, oh, I wish that person hadn't said that, because now I know what they are.
Yeah. Yeah. And
And
it is so difficult. When I've done the episode recently with Sari Taylor, and you talk about friends, friends and family who can see it from the outside, but how do they then approach it? Because if the person who's in that situation isn't ready to see it themselves, you can't force it. You can't say, look, I can see it. How the hell can you not see it?
yeah.
It's unique to each person, isn't
That's
it?
right,
Yeah.
absolutely. But what you can do is be there for them when
Yeah.
that light bulb switches on,
Yeah.
which is a devastating time. And another thing that I've seen, because what I did with the book was written, and part of the book is about self-awareness, self-belief, and self-confidence.
Yeah.
And essentially, what I thought was, I'll write this book, and that'll be it. But that didn't happen.
Yeah.
And women started coming to me saying, can you help me? Like, I've been in abusive relationships. I seem to get back into more abusive relationships. So I developed a series of workshops for women who've been in abusive relationships. And that's not necessarily intimate partner relationships. Some people were coming to me because of parents being abusive, siblings being abusive, friends being
Absolutely.
abusive, colleagues being abusive,
Yeah.
people in authority being abusive. So the find your voice in relationships is really quite generic. So what you do with that one is I say at the beginning, have a particular person in mind while you are going through this process.
Yeah.
But you can come back and do that process again with a different person.
Yeah. And I was going to say, you just hit a really good point there as well about if you're in an abusive relationship, very often you will put up with things in other areas of your life. So whether it's work, whether it's friendships, you will tolerate more because your level of tolerating to start with is so much higher than most people's because you're living with a perpetrator.
It's
So
because your boundaries are crap.
exactly, you've got no self-worth, no self-esteem,
Absolutely.
and
people will take advantage of that.
yeah, absolutely.
Across the spectrum of all your relationships.
Yeah, and that's something, do you know what? In all the episodes I've done, that's one thing that's never been pointed out. And yet it's so true and so simple a concept to understand. And I think anybody could understand that concept, that if you are in an abusive relationship, the chances are you will experience abuse in other areas of your life because to you, it's normal. Somebody talking down to you, somebody calling you names, whatever it is, it's your normal. So you will put up with it. But I think that's a really important point to make. And so then not only do you have to, if you are lucky enough to leave the relationship, process what you've been through, you've also got to start then processing all the other areas of your life where you have kind of not had those boundaries and not said no to people. I think that's a biggie, isn't it? Learning to say no. That comes up in a lot of kind of group facilitation work that I've done as well, is that learning to say no to certain, that you don't have to say yes to everything. You don't have to be a people pleaser.
And that comes from family.
Yeah.
A lot of it comes from family.
Yeah.
And what's expected of you as a child, what you put up with as a child. And another thing about it is some families are quite chaotic and there's a lot of drama.
Yeah.
And then that becomes your normal.
Yeah.
So you go into a relationship and you wonder why there's no drama, because the other person hasn't come from toxic family traits. And you're like, what this relationship's no good. I'm not getting this buzz, I'm not getting this
I'm not getting that. Yes. Yeah.
And it's like, it's because you've been in an abusive relationship from being very tiny. And in actual fact, this person isn't boring or not giving you attention. They're just giving you a different kind of attention to what is your normal, which is, I find that so sad.
Do you know, you just made me think then of somebody who once had said to me about a situation. So they've been in an abusive relationship, were fortunate enough to, well, I say fortunate enough, there was a lot of other things going on, but would manage to no longer be in that relationship. Years down the line, when they met somebody else and they had a disagreement with that person for the first time, they couldn't believe that it didn't end in screaming, shouting, things being thrown, stomping out of the house, going out for hours to never return kind of thing. They couldn't believe that just have a disagreement could be two people can disagree and then still live, cohabit, still love each other, still have a relationship. And I think it's when you sort of get to that point and you can say to that person, well, that's respect. That's respect in a relationship. It's so true, isn't it?
So true. And it's so sad. But for me, respect is more important than love.
Yeah.
Certainly in a romantic relationship, because love can, it can go up and down like that. But if you've got respect all of the time, but if we're not taught that.
And then having to, you can imagine somebody 30s, 40s, 50s being in a new relationship and thinking, this is how it always should have been. The equality, the respect, the friendship. And another, I mean, again, I agree, respect, 100%, you have to have respect. I think if you can be friends with your husband, wife, partner, whoever they are, if you can have a friendship where you can have those disagreements. And I think it's so important. I think it is important to disagree. I think it's important not to have exactly the same thoughts as another person, because then you get to see a different perspective of something, don't you? And you can say,
when somebody presents, when you first start seeing somebody and they present as agreeing with everything that you say, and your favorite color is their favorite color, their favorite, they support the same football team and they like the same music, that's a red flag.
Absolutely. Yeah. Just agree with everything.
Relationship, if you just agree with everything, that's a big red flag. I remember when I first started seeing my husband, and we met at a pub and we were talking, and my favorite band is the Bee Gees.
Brilliant. Love the Bee Gees.
I've got older siblings, so that's why I've got a very skewed,
influenced,
eclectic idea of what good music is.
eclectic. That's the word.
Eclectic. I have a very eclectic taste, from punk to Led Zeppelin,
I love
to
it.
Fleetwood Mac to
Brilliant.
Bee Gees, all kinds. But the Bee Gees, I love the Bee Gees, especially that disco time.
Yes. Yeah.
When I told my husband that I love the Bee Gees, if he had said to me, I love the Bee Gees too,
Yeah.
I would have walked out. I would never have seen him again.
You wouldn't have seen him again.
That would have been it. That would have been it, because no, because
No.
the chances of that happening. But when somebody, because they call that mirroring, don't they? When they come back at you, which is great if you're in an interview for a job.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
But not so
But
much
not a
for
relationship. Not somebody you potentially may spend the rest of your life with.
Absolutely no. So that when you've got that kind of family where you're people pleasing,
Yeah.
you're going into a relationship, and it's just so sad that people get into that kind of pattern. And it is a pattern, isn't it? Because the reason that the Be Kind became a community interest company is because I didn't even know, right? I wrote this book, right? My background's policing, right? That's all I know.
Love it.
And work in multi-level marketing companies where pretty much everything but selling is done for you.
Yeah.
Okay, it's done. I didn't know what a kick was. I didn't know it was a thing.
Didn't know it existed.
So now I've learned so much in the last couple of years.
Yeah.
And it became a community interest company because so many people came to me and said, can you do you do workshops?
Yeah.
And I was like, I never thought of that. But
Yeah, brilliant.
So it was like the demand came before the supply, because then I had to produce something. But then in my heart, because the Be Kind's written for teenage girls, and you can read it as an adult, and it's written for teenage girls, but everybody should read it.
Yeah.
There'll
be something in there for everybody.
Yeah, totally. One of the things I don't want is, but like we've just saying, if you come from a family where drama is normal, like some of the behaviors that are red flag behaviors, that if you're a teenager and you're, say, 15-year-olds, and one of you does something that's a red flag, that does not mean that you're an abusive person. It just means that is what you've been taught so far. So you need to have those conversations with teenagers to say, this is a red flag, but this is the green flag. This is what you could be doing. This is what you should be saying. Because, if that red flag is learned behavior, you're not going to write that person off.
No.
Now, if that person then goes on and it becomes entrenched abuse in their relationships, they're an abuser.
Yeah.
But when you're a teenager, you've still got that opportunity to learn and to understand and to embrace what healthy relationships look like, feel like.
Yeah, that's it is. And I think, what you're doing, I've always been passionate about children, teenagers, children and young people having that understanding and being given the choice to understand abuse. We've almost kind of, as a society, government, whoever, has decided, we don't talk about it to children, we don't talk about it to young people because, it's something that's taboo. Well, if it's taboo for adults, then they're going to think that it's taboo for children and young people. But the problem is those children and young people are going to grow up. And I'm like you, I'm not one for statistics, but statistically, somebody is going to be a perpetrator, somebody is going to be a victim or a survivor, and these are the facts. And it's, unless we can get to talking to younger people and saying, this isn't normal behavior, this isn't a relationship where there is respect, where there is love. And there's so many, you probably know better than anybody with what you do, but social media, I didn't have a mobile phone till I was 21, I think I was, or something.
Some of the stuff I did when I was a teenager, I'd probably still be into.
Oh God, yeah, I'm glad there weren't phones out. I'm glad there wasn't social media back then.
There was nothing. I didn't have to be perfect all the time.
Yeah.
I didn't have to present. But one of the things about when you have teenagers, and I say this to every parent, and I'm really very passionate about how you engage with your children.
Mm.
I have a problem with punishment,
Yeah.
because to me, punishment smacks of demanding obedience.
Yeah. And that you're right.
So one of the things I've always said to my kids is, right, you are, I know, like certainly when they were a little bit older in their teens, they're adults now, but I know you're going to do things that you know that I'm going to disagree with,
Mm.
but you're still going to do them.
Mm. Mm.
And I'd rather you didn't. But if you do it and you find yourself in a situation that you know I would be mad at you for being there,
Mm.
for example, going to a party or going somewhere, and if you feel at risk, if
Mm.
you're uncomfortable, if you feel like you're in danger or your friends are in danger, I do not care where you are. I
Yeah.
do not care what time of the day it is.
Mm.
You phone me and I will come and get you,
Yeah.
and I will not ask you any questions. If
Mm.
you want to tell me, that's entirely up to you.
That's brilliant. I love
And
that.
that, I
Yeah.
think that is important, because I speak to so many young women who have been raped, who have got themselves into situations
Mm.
that they know they shouldn't be in. Like they go off in the car with the boy or whatever.
Yeah.
They go to a party and they feel that they have no choice, because if they ring their parent or carer, they will be in
Going to
what
be
we
told
call
that. Yeah.
they'll get wrong.
Yeah.
And so many young women get raped. And I'm sure, I don't talk them, but I'm sure young men do too.
Oh God, absolutely. And I think, you're right. If, we all have been there. We've all been teenagers. We all want to test the boundaries, especially if you've tried to be a good kid, or a good teen. And then you will get to a point where you want to do things that your parents would not necessarily agree with, because you start thinking, well, it's my life. And, very much centered around ourselves as teenagers, aren't we? And what we want.
That's
But
the job, isn't it?
yeah, but exactly. And I think you're right. I think if they know, and again, that's down to respect and trust, isn't it? If they know that even if they mess up, that they can still come and have that conversation, then it kind of gives you that feeling of some form of safety, isn't it? A safety net to say, actually, I know that I've made that clear. I'm not going to come down on you like a ton of bricks. And where does that get anyone anyway?
Oh, well.
It doesn't, does it? It doesn't get anyone
As a
anywhere.
parent, I'm there to safeguard my children.
Yeah.
I'm not there to judge them.
Yeah.
Bells, I've made plenty of mistakes.
Yeah. Haven't we all? We all. And I think that's what's beautiful about what you're doing, because it's such a crucial time, I think, in the world in general, in terms of teenagers understanding their own worth, understanding that they're more than an image on a social media, looking perfect and everything else, that actually what's up here, what comes out of here, I mean, what you say, what you think, what you feel, you have the right to your own opinions, your own thoughts, your own feelings, and somebody else doesn't have the right to take that away from you. And then that's how very much in abusive relationships, like you said before, about the mirroring, and oh yes, I like everything you like, and yes, let's all, let's do this, let's do that. But then slowly that starts to change, and it flips, doesn't it? And it becomes all about what they want. But they've by that point you've been love bombed, as they say, into believing that this person absolutely adores the bones of you, and that's it, it's the two of you forevermore. But if you're a teenager and you get into that, I mean,
because you think, oh, it must be me. It must be me. And first of all, teenagers are programmed to seek attention.
Yeah.
That's their job.
Yeah.
And then as adults, we criticize them. Look at her, she's always seeking attention.
Yeah.
Well, duh.
Well, if as adults we stood back for a few minutes and thought, I've done it with my own kids more recently as they're starting to get a bit older, and you do find yourself going, but I was that age once. Did I get it right 100% of the time? No. Did I fall out with my parents? Yes, absolutely. We all do. And I think if we were as adults a bit more honest with ourselves about how we, behave as teenagers, then we would cut a bit more slack for those that do end up in abusive relationships.
Absolutely. One of the things that we talk about in the Find Your Voice sessions, which are for adults, is telling yourself the truth.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's a very challenging session.
I can't, oh my God. I bet that session runs over as well, because there'd be a hell of a lot.
A lot of
to unpack.
discussion about that, because we just don't do that.
No.
So with the ABC program for girls, it's more about self-awareness, self-belief, and self-confidence, and also being made aware of the red flags. Because when somebody tells you you're wonderful, you want to believe them. But what they're actually doing is they're gaining your confidence, and then you tell them things about yourself, and they are what I would call intelligence gathering.
Oh yeah, they could work for the CIA, couldn't they?
Oh, they could, yeah. Well, it's very clever, but it's they all do it. So it's a pattern that you can see. So intelligence gathering in order to use your vulnerabilities down the line.
Yeah. Yeah.
So when
And
you
throw it
start
back
coming,
at you. Well, you said
yeah,
that.
absolutely.
Yeah.
You just have to be careful, because when you go into a relationship, you want it to be fabulous.
Of course you do.
You
No.
don't go and you don't start seeing somebody thinking, well, this is going to be shit.
Yeah.
Do you? You want it to be lush. You want, oh, you think, oh, I fancy them. That's nice. Let's go out. And then it's lovely. And then you want it to be lovely, and you really hope it's going to be lovely. So you've got that, what they call those rose-coloured goggles on, haven't you? So when you've got your rose-coloured goggles on, all flags are red. So it doesn't really
Yeah. Yeah.
So you have to be very careful. But at the same time, you want that buzz at the beginning, don't you? Because that buzz at the beginning is addictive.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you love it. And then when somebody starts chipping away at your confidence, and that's why you need to know those red flags at the beginning.
Yeah.
So that, when you're out and they say something like, no, I wouldn't normally go out with somebody who's a brunette, but I think you're lovely.
Yeah. Little.
Then you go, really?
Yeah. Oh, that's so true. That is so true. And it's those
There's the
little.
door. There's the
Yeah.
door.
Yeah. There's those little
Those
comments
those little
yeah.
tiny, I call that the thin end of the wedge,
Mm.
but they're there.
Yeah.
How somebody treats the waiting staff in a restaurant.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. How if you watch the perpetrator and how they treat other people,
Yeah.
it just becomes clearer and clearer. The problem is, like you say, when you're in that situation and you're so, crazy about them and you think they're crazy about you, then that complicates things, because, you feel like you've made that commitment and that's it now, you're stuck almost.
Aren't you? You're making an investment. But if you know those red flags at the beginning, and you know that it's not you, that's the thing with teenagers, isn't it? They always self-blame. It must be my fault. I must have done something wrong, or I wore the wrong coloured dress, or I'm too fat, or I'm too thin. I watched the Barbie movie the other night.
Oh, did you?
Honest to God. It's brilliant. But the speech, have you seen it?
Oh, I took my daughter to see it. Yeah. And I have to say, I was crying and she was sort of looking at
I
me.
couldn't stop crying. I was
Brilliant.
like, that's so true.
It is so
It's
true.
so true. And teenagers take that on by times 100.
Yeah.
I know I did.
Yeah.
I remember watching years ago, it was a Brooke Shields film called Endless Love.
Ah, right.
And if I watched it again, I'd probably be furious, because I know now what I know now. But I sobbed. And when you're at 15, your emotions are so much, like mine were anyway.
Yeah.
They were like massive.
Yeah. Yeah.
Massive, intense
Emotions, yeah.
And then people go, oh, look at her, she needs attention, or
Yeah.
look, she's a big drama queen. I wasn't. I was just feeling everything at the end, like the far end of every spectrum. If I was really happy, I was massively happy. If I was sad, I was massively sad. If I was crying, I was sobbing uncontrollably. I didn't have that control volume on my emotions until I was probably about 25.
Yeah, and again, I think that's something that resonates with people, because we're going through a lot as teenagers, hormones, all sorts of things going on with your parents, or you may have never lost anybody and you could lose a grandparent. I remember when my granddad on my mum's side, when he passed away, and I mean I was in my 20s by this point, and had a little baby. And I, you know, it took me a very long time, and I don't think I'd ever get over it because he was such a huge part of my life. But, you know, there's all these things that are going on around us. And then adding to that, meeting somebody that looks like they're the absolute savior of your world and they're perfect.
Who
And
doesn't tell you to tidy your room? Who doesn't tell you that you've got to be back home by a certain time? Who doesn't impose any rules or regulations?
Yeah, then you're going to think that they're the bee's knees. And a really good point you just made there about the films as well, because I'm trying to think of one now, but I'm sure there's things I've watched in recent years that I'd watched when I was younger and I've rewatched again and thought, that's disgraceful, that ending. I'm not happy about that. I'm not happy the way that was left, or she ended up doing this, or whatever it would be. You know, that you grow, you learn, you get older, you have various perspectives.
The Hollywood dream. Okay, we've got a conversation going on in our group at the minute about the toxicity of media.
Yeah.
So films, TV series, song lyrics.
Oh God, yeah.
It's like,
Yeah.
when you look back, I mean, Friends. Used to watch the Friends.
Friends, yes, yeah.
I loved that. I loved
yeah.
it. Really enjoyed it. And it's basically a man refusing to take no for an answer for 10 years.
I've never thought of it that way. Oh my God, I've never thought of it that way.
I know, it's quite scary.
God, that, do you know what? That's a whole other, that's a light bulb moment for me.
Spoil it for you.
Yeah, no, not at all. No, it's just like, oh my God. Do you know, it made me think as well, because when I was growing up, and I was very close to my grandparents, and it was very much the old Hollywood, so the 1950s kind of films, the 1940s kind of films. And again, it was always about the woman looking perfect, you know, the man chasing or whatever it was, and then, you know, it goes up and down through the relationship, and then, you know, they ride off into the sunset and everything's wonderful. And it's only as you get older that you go, that was all a load of rubbish. You know, hang on a minute, you know, pining over somebody.
I love a black and white movie.
Yeah.
My favourite movie of all time is Pride and Prejudice with Maria Carson and Laurence Olivier. It was made in 1940.
Yeah. And you know, this when I look back now, this growing up with things like, I don't know, Seven Brides, Seven Brothers, you know, all these kind of the musicals and the this.
That as well.
And the thing is, you know, it's wonderful to go back and the nostalgia and watch things again and enjoy it for what it is. And I think, but sadly, when I now look back at my own life, I think how much of that was Sense and Sensibility or whatever. It'd be pining for somebody, and for that, like you say, wanting that buzz, wanting that feeling, and you want that to hang around forever. But sadly, as we get older, we realize that it is the respect, it is the friendship, it is the equality in a relationship, all these things that actually will sustain a relationship, and you will be happy, and you can be happy.
Alternatively, if you're not happy, you get pathologized.
Oh yeah,
something wrong with you, so you go to the doctor, and the doctor gives you depressants or antidepressants, isn't it? So you go to the doctor, because when you're being abused, emotionally abused, psychologically abused, I mean, one of the things that comes out of my group quite a lot is when I have the conversations, and then women come to me and go, "I've just realised I'm 17 years into an abusive marriage because of what you said."
Yeah,
because they think it's physical abuse.
Yeah.
But emotional abuse and psychological abuse actually does affect you at a cellular level.
Yeah.
So it is physical abuse, and that's why you feel so ill.
Yeah.
So you then go to the doctor, because if you're with an abuser, they will quite frequently say to you, "You're crazy, you." They'll do what the term is gaslighting, but basically just means they make you think that
you're losing your mind,
and you've lost your mind, or you've done something that you haven't done, or they haven't done something that they have done, or they haven't done something that they say they have.
Don't you remember I told you?
Nuts, yes. To make you think that you're crazy. So you go to the doctor because you feel terrible. You think, "Oh my God, I've got depression." And the doctor gives you antidepressants. And then your abuser, who's been accusing you and telling everybody around you that you've got mental problems.
That you're crazy, yeah.
Because they create a narrative around you about behind your back.
Yeah. Yeah.
So then you go to the doctor gives you the meds, and then your abuser goes, "Look, I said she was crackers, she's on medication."
Yeah, exactly. That, you know, it's it's proving their point. And I think this is why it's so important now.
Lose, isn't it? Lose.
Oh God, yeah. When, it's so important now that if you do go to the GP and you do, and like you say, so many times that happens when somebody will feel that way, they'll go, and then the answer is antidepressants or some form of medication. But now there's social prescribers who, when I used to work for the charity I worked for before, there was a lady there that I met, and she was a social prescriber. And the idea is to try and step away from that more and look for alternatives.
Yeah.
To whether it's group facilitation, whether it's counselling, whatever it is, that may just make that difference and make that person think, hang on a minute, I'm not going mad because I'm sitting here with, your workshops will have that effect, and exactly, that people go, well, they've experienced it and so I'm not alone. And that's a big one, isn't it? Realizing that you're not on your own. It isn't always physical. It can be psychological, it can be financial, it can be emotional. There's so many. And that's why I think it is hard for society to process domestic abuse. And sometimes it bothers me that maybe the term domestic abuse is what puts people off or confuses people, because they don't really then understand all the other aspects of abuse.
They should just drop the word domestic.
Yeah, I think so. Absolutely. Because it makes it sound as if it's only husband and wife, or, husband and husband, wife and wife. It makes it sound as if that's it. There are no other options. And it makes it sound, and sadly over the years, and I'm sure as a police officer, you experience this, where people go, they're just having a domestic, that became such a,
police officers say it.
Yeah, having a domestic. So it makes it sound, you automatically, your brain goes to, well, it must be physical. Someone's thrown a plate, someone's screamed, someone's done whatever. So we've got this built up idea in our minds of what we think domestic abuse is. And I think until we change the term and we change how we talk about it, and I think you're right, I think it's pure and simple abuse. It is abuse. It's
terrorism in the home, really.
Yeah, absolutely. And, interestingly, when you're saying before about, we were talking about relationships and how if you do have all the kind of components, whether it's, respect and friendship and all the rest, I'd written a blog recently about relationships. And one of the things I said in it was, but you don't have to be in a relationship after you've experienced abuse. You can choose to be perfectly happy on your own, work on yourself, do whatever you need to do. There's no pressure. Just because society may sort of think, well, they're not with anybody after they've been through this abusive relationship. Maybe that's what's right for them. Yeah. And it is, by not being in an abusive relationship anymore, it's your time to take back that power and control and say, actually, from now on, it's what I want to do and what I feel comfortable with and what I feel is within my boundaries of what I'm willing to, experience in a relationship. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work.
Yeah.
With that person.
You could do that exercise that I use where it's like, write down what you want.
Yeah.
And then live that life that you want. Because some people don't know what boundaries are.
No.
No. Some people don't know how to say no.
Yeah.
Some people don't know that that's allowed.
Yeah. That's really true, is you are allowed to say no. And again, I know when I've done things in the past with a group and we talk about saying no, and you don't have to say a flat out, no, I'm not doing that. It can be, actually, on this occasion, thanks, but I'm doing such that. You can do it in a way that isn't going to cause offense, and you know what, if it does cause the other person offense, well, then that's how they've chosen to receive that information. That's not your problem.
I think it's really important that people have boundaries, not just for themselves, but for that other person as well.
Yeah.
Because that other person, if you don't know what boundaries are and you don't know what your boundaries are, and you're doing things or saying things and then your behavior is different from what you've said, the other person's confused then. Because they don't know, like, we're not mind readers.
That's true.
Unless you are mind readers.
No, I'm glad I'm not.
Oh God, can you imagine what it'd be like walking through the town centre if you were
just had a flash then in my brain going, oh God, no. There's enough like you, there's enough going on up there. I'm all good.
That'd be terrible. You need to be very articulate about what's okay and what's not okay, and just say it. And then if that other person isn't happy with that, then they're just not happy with that.
Well, what does that show? What does that show you? And if they're not happy and they can't move forward with that, well, then
Or
that
they're not,
speaks volumes. And
that's
I
not
think,
the
again, if
person,
you've got
that's not the right
children,
person.
yeah. And if you're trying to put boundaries as a lot of what I talk about is post-separation abuse. And again, in there isn't the word domestic. It is post-separation abuse. And a lot of the time, if children are involved and a parent, whichever parent it is trying to put boundaries in place for themselves, they're also doing that to try and put boundaries in place for their children, because their children are watching everything that's going on, listening to everything that's going on. And, it can be a really tricky situation for a parent to manage.
One of the things that you've mentioned about the term domestic abuse, people have this idea, but also in society, people say things like, what goes on behind closed doors is nobody's business.
Yeah.
And, well, do you want your children to come from a broken home?
Broken home. Yeah.
Well, actually, it's already broken.
Yeah.
And if somebody's being abused behind closed doors, it is other people's business.
Yeah.
Otherwise, because the perpetrator, one thing that perpetrators do quite early on is isolate you from your support network.
Yeah, definitely. That's part of
And
the pattern.
by
Definitely.
having that attitude of it's nobody's business what goes on behind closed doors, it's just further isolating a victim.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you need, I would love to run courses for parents of adult children
Yeah. Yeah.
and look at what their attitudes are,
Mm.
because a lot of people stay in abusive relationships because of the family dynamic.
Yeah. Yeah. And it can be down to religion. It can be down to your
Absolutely.
culture. Yeah.
Totally. But about, you've made your bed, you've got to lie in it.
Yeah.
It should be illegal to say that out loud.
Yeah. Yeah. To say that's it. You made that promise. You have to stay with that person
I have to
forevermore.
stay with that
Yeah.
person.
Because what is that doing to that child? What is that, or children,
Like I said right at the beginning, domestic abuse and child abuse, it's the same
yeah.
thing. Where there is domestic abuse, that is child abuse.
Child abuse. Yeah.
And my brother, I've got 4 brothers, and one of them said to me, the best thing that a man can do for his children is to love their mother.
Yeah.
Which is
Yeah.
a brilliant line.
Yeah.
Because if you are abusing the mother of your children, by proxy, those children are being abused, because the mother of the children, in 99.9% of cases, that is their main carer. And if that main carer is under stress and anxious, that reflects through to the children.
Yeah. Absolutely.
But out there being abusive and going, well, I'm not abusive, I'm a good dad or I'm a good mum, and you're abusing that child's carer, you're not a good dad, you're not a good mum.
No, that is so true. And I think another kind of layer of how complex it all is I was saying this recently when I was talking at an event, and I was saying what we have to remember as a society is very often, not always, but very often, children love both parents in an abusive relationship. They love their mum, they love the dad. And for them, it's so difficult to separate out that one may be a perpetrator, because like anything, like any human being, all we want to see is the best in people. And we want to believe that deep down, even if somebody appears to be cruel to you or doing whatever they're doing, that actually underneath all of that, you want to believe that the essence of them is good. And sadly, with an abuser, with a perpetrator, it is a pattern of behavior, and they will continue to do it. So that child loving somebody that will continually and continue to abuse them is heartbreaking, but you can't stop that child having those feelings. It's almost like, what is the answer? Because if you say, well, no, you shouldn't have feelings for that parent, then what happens to them when they get older? But if they have feelings for that parent, then eventually they start to see things for themselves. That's all you can hope, isn't it, really?
Yeah. I think kids realize quite early on.
Yeah.
I certainly, in terms of their feelings of safety from being tiny, from before they were born,
Yeah.
they can feel that. But when you get kids to like 7, 8, 9 year old, they will tell you what they think of the other parent. Doesn't mean they don't love them, but at least they see it. You don't have to say bad things about your abuser to your children, because they do it all themselves.
Yeah, their
Either
actions,
their
what they,
actions are,
yeah,
you know, evident, and
yeah,
certainly you don't have to verbalize it because they can do it all themselves. They don't need any help from you to make their
no.
kids go, what a dick.
Yeah, basically. Yeah, that is so true. And I think, you know, doing the courses that you're doing the workshops you're doing, it's important. It's important to have that information out there. It's important that people know that they can go and find out more, because teenagers seem to be kind of like the lost sort of piece of the puzzle at the moment. And they are the ones that are going to go into the next generation of abusive relationships. And somebody asked me the other day about technology and abuse, and they said, is you know, in terms of technology, is it used in abusive relationships? And I was saying, you know, sadly, as abuse evolves, so does technology, and it moves along with it. So whether it's through social media, the stalking and harassment is no longer just an in-person following somebody. It can be through all sorts of IT, all sorts of technology.
It's quite scary,
It
actually. Like I
is.
say,
And
a teenager,
teenagers, you know, need to be more
the
aware,
only
need to be
person
more.
who needs to know where you are. The only person who needs to know where you are when you're 15 is your mum
Yeah.
and your dad.
Yeah.
You
Your
know,
parents just need to know where you are.
your
No,
girlfriend or your new boyfriend doesn't need to know. I was at an organisation a little while ago. It's support services for young mums.
yeah.
And I was just there to observe as a guest. And during one of the sessions, the lady who was running the session said to the girls, there were about 20 girls there,
Wow.
switch your phones off, like
Yeah.
off. And they were
Yeah.
like, what? Why? Just switch them off, right? So they did this thing, and then after 10 minutes, they switched them back on. And they were pinging, ping, messages. Where are you? Why is your phone off? What are you doing? And it was none of it came across as, is everything all right?
Mm.
It was all, what are you doing? Where are you? Where have you been? Why is your phone being off? And
Mm.
one, it was her partner. What are you doing in that hotel? Because the venue we were in was next door to a hotel.
Right.
Who are you fucking?
Wow. Wow. And that just showed, so they've tracked them on their phone and they can see
So they're
where
on the
they,
phone, so they know that they've switched their phone off.
God.
Literally no, and none of, they didn't all get a message,
No.
but of the about 10 of them got messages.
I was just going to say, a decent
Half
number
of
will
them
have had that kind
got
of.
messages, and not one of them was of concern. And not one
Right.
of them was saying, is everything all right? And one of them was extremely abusive.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's like,
What does, I mean, that speaks volumes, doesn't it? That absolutely does speak volumes. Is and to be, and that's the sad thing now, is because everybody has their phones on 24/7. Then, you know, if you, a lot, I've noticed a lot with children and teenagers as well, is they're constantly on FaceTime together. So when they're, you know, they practically live with each other, even though they're living in different houses and have different parents, they're all like, oh yeah, I'm just doing this. And they almost live with each other. And it's quite invasive in some ways, because you think, where, you know, where's that kind of that boundary, you know? And if then as you get older as a teenager and you're dating somebody and you're living in different houses and you're, I don't know, 15, 16, 17, whatever, and that person is constantly on to you going, oh yeah, I'll just be on the phone while you're doing whatever you're doing or doing your homework, or, you know,
oh,
it's there's no respite from it. It's
no.
just so
And
invasive and so oppressive to me.
they just want to know where you are all of the time.
Mm.
And they can know where
And
you
and the
are
sad thing is now they can.
and who you're with and
Yeah.
what you're wearing.
Yeah. I knew somebody once after the relationship had ended, and she hadn't been out for a very long time, and she went out with some friends, and eventually, I think it was the following day or something like that, the ex-partner had said, when she started with a cold, didn't feel great, and the ex-partner was saying, well, you couldn't have felt ill last night because you were out at such and such a bar with these people, and they knew exactly what that person was doing. And you think that even once you're no longer in that relationship, they still can stalk and harass you. I think, you know, it's so important that people do know that there are workshops. We can help ourselves. We can be more informed. I think that's one of the biggest things to realize is, if you're more informed, then you can help yourself more,
I
and you
call it
can,
target hardening.
yeah, target. I like
Because
that.
if you're more informed, you're less likely to
Yeah,
continue seeing somebody
yeah.
who's displaying that type of behaviour.
Behavior, yeah. And I think that's the only way it can ever, and you can have support services, you can go and have, your counseling, you can do all those things. I think for me, all of that is important, absolutely. And it's important to know that you can pick up that phone, you can go online. There are people out there who know what they're doing, who know that whatever you say, if you say to them, you're never going to believe what I'm about to tell you, they will. They'll have heard pretty much everything.
Yeah.
And it is there. But if we also then learn when we're ready, and we're ready to start to process things, if we're ready then to say, okay, now I'm going to maybe learn a bit more about this, understand a bit more, then I can protect myself, I can protect my children. And you can only do the best that you can do.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Oh, I
Putting the
think
right to
part of
right
me thinks we
forward.
just could carry on. I think we could carry on all day, to be perfectly honest with you. But yeah, no, I think it's, so what I was going to say as well is, when I put this obviously onto YouTube and Spotify and the website, I'll put on the resources page as well a link to your book, if that's okay.
Fantastic.
And yeah, and the C.I.C, and then people can go and have a look and see
Yeah.
what you're doing. And yeah,
I think for me, I just don't want people to have the heartbreak that I've seen people have.
yeah, yeah,
And you do have choices.
yeah. That is a big
The thing
part.
is, you don't have to be in a relationship. You don't have to be. There's the Joanne Trollope
Oh yeah,
novel from the 80s, I think.
that's a name that's taken me back to
Joanna Trollope, yes,
the trollop.
wrote
Yeah,
the rector's wife.
yeah,
Obviously, it was about a rector's wife.
yeah,
And there's a line in there that says, I am not the oars to his boat. I am a different boat. And that stuck with me because I was a teenager when I read that.
yeah.
And that stuck with me.
I'm not the
That's
horse
a
to his boat.
brilliant
Yeah,
line.
you're not an appendage.
You are not an appendage. You are a separate person
Yeah,
with your own dreams and your own needs and your own wants.
yeah,
And you can fly. I
yeah.
remember because I got divorced when my children were quite young.
Mm,
And I remember being terrified,
mm,
honestly feeling terrified. And I did it. And the relief was immense.
yeah.
So
And I could, with that freedom, like you say, there's the fear that comes with it. But what opportunities lie ahead? Look at what you're doing now.
the reason I left is because I was given the domestic abuse officer's job. I didn't want it.
Mm.
And they put me on training courses, and I began to realize that I was in an abusive relationship.
Yeah. You were informed. You were being informed. You were getting that. Yeah, exactly. That's
And
so.
I was like, oh my God.
Yeah.
But I was scared.
Yeah. And
I
I
was
think,
really
one
scared.
thing I think is really important, and I said this to somebody recently, whenever I do these episodes, I think what's really important is we have to be realistic. I don't think there's any point in trying to give people the Hollywood image of what your life's going to be like if you leave. It will be difficult. More often than not, it gets harder before it gets better.
Definitely.
You will need support, and I say all these things, and I know sometimes people look at me going, oh, but you're going to scare people. But actually, you've got to be realistic. You have to be truthful, because otherwise, if we as professionals aren't being truthful and aren't telling people, actually, it is going to be very difficult, then we're doing exactly what the rest of the world is doing, and anyone who hasn't necessarily experienced abuse directly themselves is saying, well, why didn't you just leave then? We have to be honest and say it isn't that straightforward. It is going to be difficult, but there is help out there. There's so much support. And you'll find if you do things like group facilitation or you do workshops, that you then bond with people that you never thought you would, but you
Absolutely.
then learn from them, they learn from you strengthen each other, and you realize that you can survive the bad days, you can survive the horrific days, and you keep moving forward.
For me, it's really important, and I have to be clear here that I mostly work with women,
Yeah,
and that's my area. I never had a put it this way, all of the perpetrators that I dealt with were men.
Yeah.
Not all of the victims were women, but all of the perpetrators were men. But what's happened with me is it's evolved, and bringing women together is really important,
Yeah.
because the situation with the isolation in abusive relationship is you're isolated from your support network. So bringing support networks together
Yeah.
is
So important. Yeah. And it empowers you. It empowers you. You know, when you see those light bulb moments in a group and you realize that somebody goes, oh my God, or somebody that hasn't said a word, and after 2 or 3 weeks starts to open up, that's when you kind of go, oh yes, this is why you do what you do. Because you know, all you want to do is help. You just want to help people, don't you? You just want to help them see that there is a better future, whatever that entails.
My key is prevention. I don't
Yeah.
want to have people go through what I've seen people go through.
Yeah.
And by knowing the red flags at the beginning,
Yeah,
you can make informed choices.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And doing that, like you say, I mean, with teenagers, with young people, it is, for me, that is where the answers lie. With younger people, with talking to them, with, you know, by the time we're talking 20, 30, 40, you've been in a relationship, and you're then the other end where you're having to try and process it all. Whereas if like you say, if it's that informed choice, if it's that information, if it's those red flags and patterns beforehand, the chances are somebody might then say, hang on a minute, this relationship isn't for me. And that's worth its weight in gold.
Just really having those conversations.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because parents are, one of the things I wanted to say was, I've stopped using the term intimate partner, because I work with teenagers and parents are like, my children don't have intimate partner relationships. And I just have to say, right, like, there's more to intimacy than shagging.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I've stopped using that. So I say, when your kids start dating people,
yeah,
because it's like, and that goes back to the thing about truth.
Yes, yeah.
It's a challenge.
I was just gonna say, you've got a challenge, but you're doing it. You're doing it, and that's what needs to be done.
Definitely.
Absolutely.
I would love to see every teenager having those conversations and discussing, but they're bombarded with such negativity on social media, on pornography sites. It's just neggy, and it's about at least diluting that, because I'm not going to be able to take on the world's press. I'm not going to be able to take on Hollywood and all the bilge that they pour out. To be quite fair, I quite like watching movies, but sometimes I'm like, oh God, switch that.
Yeah.
And some of the American TV series are so toxic, because it might be the free world, but not for ladies.
Well, I was just going to say, definitely not for ladies, and and that's, you know, again, that's something that only now, when we were talking before about the Barbie film, you know, the tide is slowly starting to turn. But again, the same with talking about domestic abuse. Somebody was saying to me the other day, when I'd started doing what I'm doing now, they were saying 10 years ago, if I was doing this 10 years ago, nobody would even want to have anything to do with it, because it would be, no, we don't talk about that on these kind of platforms. No. It's abuse. You can't talk about that. But actually, by talking about it, we're making it okay to talk about it, because it should be okay to talk about it.
And if you're a parent and you feel uncomfortable talking about relationships and sex with your kids, right?
Yeah.
Tough. Get over it.
Get over
yourself and have those conversations, because that's your job.
Yeah, it is. And if you bury your head in the sand, that's not going to change anything.
Bad things happen. I was a teenager in the 80s, right, when HIV and AIDS was splashed all over the media, and we were all going to die if we didn't use a condom.
Yeah.
Okay. And it was horrific. The gay community was just absolutely vilified. It was horrendous. But from that, I mean, I didn't have my first child until I was 28.
Yeah.
And I was always determined that my children would not die of ignorance.
Yeah.
So I've always had open conversations with my children about absolutely bloody anything they want to talk about.
Yeah.
Anything.
Yeah.
And when they've started bringing girlfriends and boyfriends home, they have to become part of that conversation as well.
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
I'm not talking about things that are important to keep you safe.
To keep you safe. Yeah, exactly. And if you do all of that and you've done the best you can do, then you can put your head on the pillow at night going, I've done the best I can. I've done the best I can. And each person is an individual, isn't it? They're going to do what they're going to do. But if you know as a parent you've tried.
Yeah, if you're a parent and you're lying in bed at night thinking, if my kid's in bother, would they talk to me? You need to have a conversation with your kid.
Yeah, absolutely.
If my child came to me and told me that this was what they'd done, would I judge or would I be concerned? You've got to have those conversations. The truth is really bloody hard.
It is. But it's better than burying your head, or sometimes as well I think of parents who are in a situation where it's the child's parent abuse. So it comes up to say teenager age and they are abusive to the parent. Is you have to be honest with yourself as a parent then, don't you, and say, well, actually I have to put boundaries in place for myself that I'm not willing to accept this behavior. And be true and being truthful with that person, saying that's, and it sounds awful and it might be your child, but at the end of the day, you have a right to have those boundaries. You have a right to be honest with them and say, this is not acceptable behavior, as opposed to just bury your head and say, oh, it's okay, carry on behaving the way you behave and it's fine.
What people have said to me is because they haven't had those types of conversations with their child. Having the book has created a bridge for them, so they can use the book as a tool to begin those types of conversations.
Yeah.
But I would also say, like, when your kids are very tiny and they come to you with their little problems, if you poo-poo their little problems and you don't listen, they won't come to you with their big problems when they're big.
No.
So listening is a massive part of safe parenting for me.
Yeah, absolutely. And sometimes by listening you learn more, don't you? You can learn a lot more sometimes as a parent if you listen
learn rather than listen to respond.
Yeah. And it's not easy for parents because we all want to, I don't know one parent that's got it right 100% of the time. It doesn't.
Sometimes I've been like raging, like internally, like, oh, don't tell me this, tell me this.
Yeah.
And I'm like, it is what it is.
But then exactly, but then they've told you that when you sort of stand back from the situation, go, but they did tell me.
And be very careful what your face looks like when they tell
you. Oh God, yeah. Because if your face tells everything, and you're like that. Yeah, going, oh God. Yeah, you have to be very careful.
And that's the same with victims of domestic abuse as well. When victims of domestic abuse tell you, it's a privileged place to be.
Oh yeah.
Closes to you, and your reaction, including the expression on your face, is vital to what that victim will do in their next step.
Yeah.
So be very careful about what you say, and certainly don't say, I can't believe it, he's so canny.
Oh, I know. I can't believe he's so kind. Or, well, I could have told you that. I could have told you they were abusive. You're just like, oh no.
You do pick them, don't you?
Yeah. You're like, no. This is we need some sort of, we need a, what you call it, like a glossary of all that as well, don't we? To say
shitty things people come out with.
Yeah, just for all of society to learn.
Actually, I'm going to go, instead of saying that, say that. I'm going to do that. I'll give it away as a freebie.
Yeah, there you go. That's what we need.
I'll put that on my to-do list.
Put it on your to-do list, yes, of things.
I've got one that's the 10 red flags when you first start dating. It's quite rude, but it's funny.
Oh, brilliant. Right, well, can I put it on the website?
Yeah.
Can I put it on the website? Oh, but Ree, thank you so much, because honestly, it's so important. What I love about all these episodes is every episode is different.
Yeah.
There's a similar thread that runs through each, because we're talking about abuse, but everybody comes out with something that hasn't been said before. And that to me just proves that doing this is so important, because at the end of the day, everyone can take that little bit of something new away from it and maybe hopefully learn and in the future help somebody else.
Yeah,
and we keep paying it forward. Yeah. Thank you so much,
Thanks,
Ree.
Lucy. It's an absolute pleasure. I love talking to you.
Oh, well, like I said, we'll have to do another.
Let's do another in a few months' time. See where I am in a few months' time.
We'll do it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.